It started like any typical Saturday afternoon sunshine. Good music, the smell of ribs on the grill, and a backyard full of laughter. I had invited some family and neighbors over for a small BBQ in my yard, something I'd done maybe 5 or 6 times a year since moving into this HOA-run neighborhood. Everyone knew me as the guy with the best smoker on the block, and honestly, nobody had ever had a problem with it. Karen moved in. Karen was new. She had bought the house across the Greenbelt 2 months earlier and wasted no time in introducing herself via email to the HOA board. The first we heard of her was when she reported someone for leaving their trash cans out for more than an hour. That someone was me. And that was the start of what would turn into a suburban war. This particular BBQ was nothing wild. No loud music, just some classic soul playing through a Bluetooth speaker. The kids were tossing beanbags. A couple neighbors were sitting around enjoying burgers, and I was at the grill with my brother, flipping ribs. Then I saw Herkeren standing at the edge of the park, arms crossed, sunglasses on, phone in hand. I didn't think too much of it until 5 minutes later when I noticed her taking photos and typing something. Aggressively, my buddy Marco nudged me. "Bro, she's either reporting a UFO or she's calling the cops on your brisket." I laughed it off until, about 3 minutes later, a police cruiser rolled up to the curb. 2 officers got out, looking around like they weren't even sure why they were there. One of them, Officer Ramos, approached me with a friendly smile. "Hey there," he said. "We got a call about a public disturbance. Someone said there were open flames and excessive smoke causing a hazard." I blinked. "You're kidding, right? This is a BBQ." Officer Ramos chuckled, clearly not taking it too seriously. "Yeah, we figured. You're well within your rights as long as it's in your yard and no one's in danger. Looks like everything's under control." But before I could thank him and offer a plate of ribs, Karen came marching across the grass like she was about to shut down an illegal operation. "Excuse me, officer. That smoke is going directly into my windows. I have asthma. And they're playing music loud enough to wake the dead." Officer Ramos tried to de-escalate. "Ma'am, we didn't measure any excessive volume, and we don't see a violation here." Karen was not having it. "So you're telling me anyone in this community can just set up a party, burn meat, blast music, and disrupt the peace?" I tried to be polite. "Karen, if you had an issue, you could have just talked to me directly. We'd have lowered the volume or moved the smoker." She spun toward me like a storm. "This is not a trailer park. We have standards, and I'll make sure the HOA handles this properly." The officers didn't issue a ticket, didn't take names, they just gave a light warning and left. Still, the mood at the BBQ shifted. Some guests left early. My aunt kept muttering how that woman needs a hobby. I laughed it off, but I was annoyed. Not just because of the cop call, but because she'd escalated something that could have easily been a neighborly conversation. The next day, I got an email from the HOA. Not a warning, but a notice of investigation. Apparently, Karen had filed a formal complaint stating I was running an unapproved event with amplified sound in a shared use area. Shared use area. That's when it hit me. My backyard wasn't technically fenced in. The property line blurred a bit into the HOA's small community greenbelt, which included a pavilion just past the edge of my lot. I never really used the pavilion itself, but the BBQ had definitely bled into that space with chairs and kids running around. Technically, I might have broken a rule, but still, this wasn't malicious. It was just a barbecue. I called the HOA rep. To talk, I explained everything, offered to move future events away from the pavilion, even suggested hosting a community BBQ for everyone. But nope, the response was cold and scripted. The board is reviewing the incident and will issue a decision within 10 business days. I was fuming. Karen had managed to weaponize the HOA within 24 hours of her tantrum. But I wasn't about to let this go down as another Karen wins again story. That's when Marco said something that stuck. Man, she wants that pavilion so bad, why don't you just buy it and host every BBQ from there? At first, I laughed. But then I got curious. I pulled up the HOA documents I received when I bought the house. Specifically, anything mentioning common areas, ownership rights, and bylaws. Turns out the HOA didn't own the pavilion directly. It was under the management of a subentity within the HOA, the Community Enhancement Fund, a side trust set up to maintain and occasionally lease the property for events. More importantly, it was severely underfunded. It hadn't been used for any major event in over 2 years. Maintenance was deferred. The HOA had actually floated the idea of selling or leasing it long-term to generate funds. My heart started racing. I called up a real estate buddy, asked him to look into the structure of that subentity and if it was possible to make an offer. The answer? Not only was it possible, light had been considered by the board last year, but was shot down due to lack of offers. So now the game had changed. Karen had poked the bear, and this bear was about to wear an apron and serve pulled pork from his own pavilion. While Karen probably thought her HOA complaint would shut me down for good, I had something else in mind: ownership. If she was going to get worked up over the community pavilion being used for a BBQ, then I was going to make sure I legally used it as often as I pleased. To do that, I needed to buy it. The first thing I did was reach out to a local property attorney. I didn't want to just throw money around without knowing what I was stepping into. He looked over the HOA structure, pulled the documents for the subentity that technically controlled the pavilion, and confirmed what I had hoped. It was not permanently owned by the HOA. It was held in trust under the Community Enhancement Fund, and that fund was hemorrhaging, apparently, ever since COVID. The HOA had struggled to collect enough dues to keep up with landscape maintenance, paint touch-ups, or even clean the community pool regularly. The pavilion, once used for seasonal events, now just sat there collecting bird poop. The board had quietly debated leasing it to local businesses for weekend yoga or pop-up farmers markets, but nothing ever materialized. So I asked my attorney, what happens if I make a formal offer to lease or even buy that property? His response was immediate. They can absolutely consider it, especially if you're offering above market value and proposing to maintain it yourself. They'd be fools not to entertain it. I was in. That night, I drafted a proposal. I offered to lease the pavilion for 5 years with an option to purchase. I'd take over maintenance, pay a generous monthly fee directly to the HOA's subfund, and allow community use with a 48-hour reservation window. It wasn't just a power move, it actually solved a funding issue they had no solution for. But I'll be honest, it was also a power move. A week later, I submitted the proposal to the board and attended the monthly HOA meeting. You better believe Karen was there too. When the board brought up an outside offer to lease the pavilion, Karen's head snapped toward me. Her eyes narrowed. She knew immediately what was going on. Hand shot up. This is absurd, she barked. This man should be fined, not rewarded. He violated HOA policies. He disrupted the peace. He almost set a field on fire. One of the board members cleared her throat. Actually, Ms. Matthews, according to the police report, there was no violation. I kept calm and professional. Look, I get it, Karen didn't appreciate my event. That's fair. But instead of fighting over the use of public space, I'm offering a solution that gives the HOA funding and gives us structure. I'll manage the space, keep it clean, and everyone wins. The room was quiet for a moment. Then one of the older board members, Mr. Lambert, leaned into his mic. Let's be honest. We've talked about doing something with the pavilion for months. He's offering more than the HOA ever got from that space. We'd be fools not to at least explore it. Karen turned to the crowd. "You're going to let him buy control over our neighborhood?" What's next? He installs a beer tap and a bounce house. That actually got a few chuckles. I looked at her, still polite. Or maybe I host a yoga class for seniors. Or a holiday potluck. Karen, this isn't personal. This is just a better use of space. It was a good pitch, and it worked. The board agreed to review my proposal. Within a few days, I received a response. They were interested in negotiating terms. My offer to lease the space was accepted unanimously even. The members Karen had likely influenced were swayed by the financial benefits. I signed the agreement that same week. 5-year lease. Option to buy at any time during that window. And yes, I got exclusive hosting rights for weekend events as part of the deal. I hired a landscaper to clean up the grounds, had the pavilion pressure washed, and even installed string lighting along the roofline. I added picnic benches, upgraded the grill, and got a local muralist to paint a gorgeous community-themed art piece on the back wall. It no longer looked like an abandoned shelter. It looked like the heart of the neighborhood now. Here's where it got spicy. The following weekend, I hosted another BBQs, time inside the pavilion. I invited the whole neighborhood. Free ribs, brisket, sweet tea. Even vegetarian options for the HOA's more health-conscious members. And I didn't just invite them, I printed flyers that read, "Come celebrate the grand reopening of our pavilion, now with real BBQ." Karen, predictably, lost her mind. She stood at the edge again, arms crossed, watching the line of neighbors getting seconds and thirds while the music played at a comfortable but legal volume. This time, she didn't call the cops. She stormed over to the HOA president instead, demanding a review of the lease agreement. He calmly told her the board had already voted. The deal was done, so she took the fight to the next level. The following week, Karen submitted her own proposal to lease the pavilion every Thursday evening for her new community improvement group. That's right, she was trying to stage her own events in my lease space. Now, technically, the lease allowed shared use as long as the primary leaseholder me was informed. 48 hours in advance, and there wasn't a scheduling conflict. I wasn't allowed to deny community use entirely. But I did have scheduling priority, so I politely replied to a reservation request with this: "Hi Karen. Unfortunately, the pavilion is reserved for a chili cook-off this Thursday. Feel free to submit a different date next week. Best, me." And that became our weekly dance. She tried to book a day, and somehow I'd already have it filled trivia nights. It's corn, hole tournaments, dog costume parades, you name it, it drove her nuts. But here's the kicker. People loved the events. They came out more often, socialized more, and some even brought their own folding chairs. Suddenly, the pavilion was no longer a dead patch of shade. It was alive. And Karen, she was just another neighbor who couldn't control the vibe anymore. 3 months into the lease, it became clear the pavilion wasn't just a property, it was power. The space gave me a platform, both literally and socially. I wasn't just the BBQ guy anymore. I was the guy making the neighborhood fun. Again, kids had birthday parties there. Retirees started using it for morning coffee chats. Even the HOA board quietly praised me for bringing life back to the green space. But one person hated every second of it. Karen hadn't given up, not by a long shot. Every time there was an event, she'd inspect the trash bins, measuring how full they were. If someone parked too close to the curb, she'd snap photos and email the HOA. At one point, she even tried to call the fire marshal because she smelled gas. Turned out it was just someone's camping stove heating up beans for chilly night. But as much as she tried to weaponize the rules, the lease agreement I held protected everything. I had signed off on every regulation, installed safety signage, and even ran an electric line through a licensed contractor so I could eliminate the need for generators. I wasn't just following the rules, I was owning them. Then, one evening, in late fall, Karen did something that genuinely surprised me. She walked over to me, no clipboard. No phone camera, just her and a Tupperware container. It was during the Sunday community potluck, and she handed it to me like it weighed 1,000 pounds emotionally. "What's this?" I asked. "Lemon bars," she muttered, clearly choking on the words. I figured I'd contribute, since, everyone seems to love this. "Pavilion now." I blinked. "Thanks. That's actually really thoughtful." She shrugged. "Just don't expect me to smile during karaoke night." She turned and walked away. I was shocked, but also a little amused. Karen had fought so hard to keep this pavilion from becoming a social hub, and now she was baking for it. But I didn't realize that was just the beginning. 2 weeks later, she filed another request to use the pavilion, this time for a weekly Thursday night bingo club. And unlike the last time, the calendar was actually open. I couldn't block her with a trivia night or fake cornhole championship. So I approved it. Yes, you read that right. I said yes. Because part of owning power is knowing when to let people participate in it. But I wasn't going to let her off that easy. According to the lease agreement, all events had to adhere to my standard facility rules, which I had printed and posted clearly on the side of the pavilion. These included no noise above 65 decibels after 9 p.m. All trash must be removed within 2 hours of event close. All events must be signed off using the online reservation form. Any recurring weekly events require confirmation for each session. No. Auto-renewals. Karen had read none of this. So the first Thursday, she showed up with a folding table, a boom mic, a speaker that blasted polka music, and about 10 of her friends from a nearby retirement complex. They set up around 6 p.m. and were still going strong at 9:15. At 9:16, I walked over. "Hey Karen, fun night." She was in a good mood for once. "It's nice to do something civilized for a change." I smiled. "Yeah. Quick heads up here, speakers over the 65 decibel limit. We've got to turn it down after 9. She stared at me like I'd just kicked her dog. "Are you serious?" "Pavilion rules. You agreed to them when you submitted the form." Looked around. There's no one else even here. Still, gotta be consistent. HOA is watching, remember. She turned to her group and mumbled something about power-hungry grill kings, but she complied. The music lowered. The crowd thinned. And just like that, Karen's bingo night was part of my system. Over the next few weeks, I actually helped her streamline the events. I showed her how to use the online calendar. I printed bingo cards for her with funny neighborhood references, like Canine for the neighbor who walked 7 dogs, or G6 for the house with the drone hobbyist. Her group started having fun, and little by little, she became less of a nuisance and more of a participant. But it was around that time that I made my final move. See, my lease included a clause, option to purchase. It meant that at any point during the lease, I could offer to buy the pavilion outright. The original value had been estimated at around $17,000, but I knew the HOA needed money. I was already their favorite tenant. So I made a call. I offered $25,000 in cash. It took a month of back and forth, a few legal hurdles, and a meeting with the HOA president, but eventually, the sale went through. The pavilion was mine, fully, forever. I had the deed framed and hung. It's inside the storage closet of the pavilion. It read, "Property of my name, Community Pavilion, the next event." I threw a massive deed day BBQ. Local food trucks, music, even a magician for the kids. Hundreds showed up. Karen, too. She even clapped after the magician pulled a dove from his sleeve. Afterward, she walked up to me again with that reluctant humility. "So, you really bought it?" "Yep." She looked up at the roofline, the mural, the people laughing. "Can't say I saw that coming." "Yeah, me either." And then something miraculous. She smiled, just slightly. "Same time next week for bingo." I nodded. "You got it? Just remember, keep it under 65 decibels." She rolled her eyes. "Fine, but I'm bringing lemon bars." What started as a petty power struggle turned into a quiet transformation, not just of a space, but of the people in it. Karen didn't become my best friend, but she became someone who contributed instead of complained. And me, I learned that sometimes the best way to win is to build something people want to be part of.